That was name, yeah? Yeah, moving quickly on. Right. So yes, we're a higher education facilitator for the prison estate, for people in prison first and foremost. We do this by partnering with universities and other education providers, and we take specific courses and degrees that have clear career pathways attached to them, and we make them accessible for people in prison in an offline context. So distance learning effectively, but with a whole new radical working model. So my background is I am someone with extensive lived experience of the criminal justice system. I'm somebody who, we live what we do effectively. I studied my way through prison and made significant changes in my own life. I went from zero education to starting my PhD before I left prison. That I'm almost all the way through, so we're nearly done. Soon be a doctor, hopefully. Fingers crossed, everyone. Nice one. I also, we also incorporated and started our business just before I was released, so a good 9 months, a year before I was released. Ruth is somebody who's taught in prisons, taught in schools, taught in teaches in universities. She's also led prison teams, prison education teams. So we bring a combined experience of prison education, especially higher education in prison, from both sides of the fence effectively. And we've utilized our skills, our experiences, both professional, lived, and academic experiences to put together this model that enables people to study at a much greater, much more satisfactory level.
We've got some slides, I hope.
Yeah, well, that's why I keep looking left at the first slides, but they're not forthcoming. All the rest of them have my name all over them, no Ruth.
I'm claiming the glory.
So, I would like to hand you over to Ruth. We are, in effect, I would just like to say, we currently have about 15 university partners and are growing that number as we go. As I started with, first and foremost, as we said, we have numerous new university partners. However, we only take specific courses and degrees right now because one of the biggest things for us is people taking on massive amounts of student debt without a clear way of repaying that debt. Yeah, without it isn't life-changing as much if you're not able to use what you learn whilst you're away. So we make sure that is the first of our remits. The second thing that is highly important is that the isolation of prison-based study. So we know if you're online learning, if you're a distance learning student, it can be quite a lonely existence. Even when you're out here in the community, finding other students, studying together, etc. It's nigh on impossible in prison. So it's one of those parts of our model that features heavily, that connecting people, connecting our students, enabling them to feel like they're a part of their university, part of the academic community is absolutely crucial for us, and we make massive strides in that area. So let me just hand over to Ruth.
I was just going to say, you promised to hand over to me at some point.
I mean, you stole all the names on the board, so I'm going to get my own back, right? All right.
So just in terms of basics, so we are a social enterprise limited by guarantee. We've been incorporated for 5 years now, and we prioritise that most of our team are people who have spent time in prison, who've studied in prison, and who are able to convey the benefits of that. So, for example, we've recently done a recruitment drive where we were advertising some new roles, and we were in a fortunate position of having really strong applications so that everybody who we shortlisted were people who had been to prison. And I was able to write replies to people saying, I'm sorry, you haven't been shortlisted for this role because you haven't been to prison. So that was quite a nice thing to be saying, and in terms of modelling what we would like others to be doing. So really I want to sort of talk you through how we're creating the cultures of acceptance is the term that we've coined for this, because I want to explain how this social value really sort of transcends lots of different areas, lots of different stakeholders. So first of all, in terms of our activities, as Dan's already described, providing a wide range of degree courses, and also really pushing on the provision of digital study. We could talk about this for ages, but an interesting point that was made recently by one of our tutors who provides telephone support for our students in prison, she actually observed that that the lack of social media and the lack of access to AI is really beneficial for students in prison, because they really have to properly read all of those journal articles and the textbooks and things. And she said the depth of understanding that her students in prison were getting from having properly read stuff, not put it through AI and got a summary, battled with it, fiercely interrogated it, you had to be using their critical thinking, has meant that the quality of work that's coming from those students is phenomenal. And she is a very well-established university lecturer, and she was delighted with the quality of the essays that students were putting out. So we've sort of got a little bit of a paradox there. We want more digital access for our students in prison, but we also recognise that there are some benefits to that sort of more isolated study. And we then offer a very comprehensive through the GATE programme of support for our students, both in terms of that sort of immediacy of, providing a laptop and some human personal support just to kind of get yourself established, some digital skills training, but also talking about, disclosure, applying for jobs, having high ambitions in terms of your career prospects. And our goal is, at the moment, it seems like Dan's a bit of an exception to the rule. We do know quite a lot of people who have experienced this and who've managed to come through the system sort of against the odds. But we don't want that to be an exception. We want to be producing people coming out of prison who are articulate, who are well qualified, who are able to contribute to research and policy reform, who are the voice of experts, who know what's needed to reduce reoffending. Ultimately, the goal here is about reducing harm in society, helping people not to commit more crime, helping people who've been victims of crime to not experience the same thing again. So in terms of social impact, it's massive. And we know that, firstly, there's this change process for students themselves, feeling a different identity, for the first time being recognised with a really positive label as a student, as a participant, as a success story. And just that change in identity, I don't know if you want to say something about what that was like for you. Your sort of, I really like your story of how it changed how you thought about the final few years of being in prison.
Yeah, I was just going to pretty much come in with that point, not necessarily with my own part, but to further that, that is absolutely true. Studying in prison wasn't just, for me, knowledge based. It wasn't just about gaining more knowledge certificates or qualifications. For me, it was a whole identity shift. That identity shift came from the softer skills, the parts that we can't quite quantify when it comes to studying, especially studying in a prison environment. So timekeeping, meeting deadlines by myself, and being, self-organization, that self-discipline to, nobody's telling me to study. Nobody's telling me to study in myself. It's about organising my own time, prioritising what actually mattered in that here and now for what was coming later. And just to speak to what Ruth's point, effectively, for me, there came a point in my sentence when I stopped doing time. When I started my second degree. I've got a few of them, by the way, but I started my second degree, and partway through, I remember being literally on a landing one day. I had an assignment to finish. I was out doing nonsense on a landing, and I thought to myself, why am I out here playing pool when I've got an assignment to finish? I went in behind my door, kicked my door shut, and got on with my studies. What that did in itself was, it wasn't an immediate, but in hindsight, as I look back, I realized that I stopped doing bird at that moment. I took the power out the door and started racing against the time I had left to complete my education. I had a goal, and I was determined to meet that goal. It changed the way in which I did prison entirely. And what I now know, in hindsight, was that was part of that identity shift. But a massive part of that, the biggest part of that, was the acceptance, was being accepted by the academic community, being accepted by my universities, by our lecturers, by people who work and live in this space. Seeing me as just somebody, seeing me as just an academic with something to offer, as opposed to an ex-prisoner or, the tokenistic, well, he's got some experience, so let's drag it from him and use it for others. It was a whole acceptance. It enabled me to move from the person I was, who'd never had a first chance, mind. And believe you me, this is not a sob story in any way, shape or form, but there's so many people in prison that we talk about second chances, But the vast majority of people in prison haven't had a first chance. Where we look at, we start life, 2 parents, going to school, going to college, going to university, supported, having roofs over your head, you walk in your house, the electric's on as normal. These are things that are taken for granted. A lot of people, especially a lot of people in prison, started without all of those things. So for a lot of them, this is their first chance. Having a real belief. I'm the first in my family to get a degree. We looked through our whole family history. It didn't happen before. It had never happened before. Now, since both my boys have been to university, both have degrees. So we've started to break that cycle. And this is what we need. Each and everybody, each and every organisation, each and every one of us, we're all contributing members of society. So we need to contribute. And we do so by, let's stop looking at everybody as just a criminal, as the dregs of our society, as the waste, but looking at them as the potential that they carry. And how do we unlock it? How do we? This is what we need to ask ourselves.
So our term creating cultures of acceptance is about working with organisations such as our university partners, such as employers, to sort of demystify, to take away the stigma. So this is just about working with people. It's not about, particularly focusing on the convictions or the past that they've had, but it's about recognising the humanity in everybody, removing the us and them and the labelling, and saying, look, actually, here's a whole pool of people who have great potential. Actually, I don't really like that phrase, unlocking potential, because we try to avoid the key locks, bars imagery. But we do have a lot of conversations with universities and with employers. We're not denying that we need to have good safeguarding practices in place, that we need to think about risk, but we need to do that for everybody. Let's not differentiate and have a different set of rules for people leaving prison. Let's have the same safeguarding practices in place for everybody. And let's look at how we run our organisations with that genuine commitment to leadership, to hearing the voices of what people are saying who've been closest to this problem. So we haven't got time to show you this video, and we didn't even think about putting a QR code up so you can find it, but guess what? You all know how to use Google. So if you go on YouTube and you Google Coracle and Student Voice, Coracle are one of our partner organisations. They provide secure offline Chromebooks that people in prison can use, and our students can have their study materials on there. This is a group of our students and Dan talking about their own experiences of study. It's a fabulous 20-minute watch. And just listening to what this study has meant for our students, we would love to have them all here in the room. But we really recommend having a little look at this short video when you have the time. And then I'm just conscious that we're rushing a bit because we're a little bit tight on time. But in terms of what it would mean for us and what we're looking for, so we know blatantly we're here because we'd like some partners. We'd like to partner with corporate organisations, with other social enterprises. We are stronger together. And so there's various ways that you can support us through, like sponsorship type stuff. We particularly look for sponsoring students to do A-levels or level 3 qualifications so they can be on the pathway towards a degree. We always need textbooks, notebooks, stationery for students in prison. And we also offer study skills support via telephone drop-in. Students love being able to speak to people about their studies, help them with their research. Can you find me some articles about this topic? So we're always looking for that kind of opportunity. But we also have various projects that we're starting to undertake that would be really good to do alongside an organisation. There's prisons all over the country, so we can make this a very regional approach, and we'd love to be speaking to organisations about what does that look like and how can we work together on this.
So we wanted to keep it short and sweet. We wanted to open the floor up to questions, statements, comments, whatever. Just throw a hand up. Don't worry about it.
With the courses that you're offering to the prisoners, do you sort of link them to areas of high growth in the UK in terms of the job market? Because I think something that can be quite demotivating is if you go through this course, you then go out to the big bad world, you don't get a job for many months, and especially at the moment where it's very difficult to get a job, how do you sort of ensure that the opportunities are there afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything we do is data-led, and we run that mapping exercise on a regular basis. So I sit on a number of the employment advisory boards across the prisons. In fact, I chair one of those in Belmarsh. And so this is a piece of work that we're constantly doing. We're constantly working with finding new employers, finding new employment opportunities. We want to know where the skills gaps are. And this is a piece of work that we do to link, you know, the degrees that people study. And obviously, even when you're doing a full-time degree, it's still a 3-year course at minimum. A lot of our students start whilst behind the door and complete once they're released, because that will, you know, cross over their release period. However, the areas that we look at generally are those that they're sustainable work, where at the end of their studies, they will still be able to find. And the difference that a degree makes for people in prison is the difference between a job and a career. So the idea is we look to find employment job opportunities for our students, especially when they're still continuing their studies post-release. Get a job so you can support your studies, and when you finish your degree, the idea is to look and start a career.
Hiya, thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. I just wanted to ask, for employers that are interested in supporting the study skills sessions, what's like the time commitment for that?
I mean, we can be really flexible, but at the moment, it's roughly people commit an hour or 2 a week to be available on the phones. We have a free phone number that students in prison can have on their list of approved numbers. And so they can call us on that number, and then we can make the person available for support. So do you want to say something else about that?
Yeah, I was literally just going to say, in terms of, so the way we've developed this model is so no details need to be exchanged, no personal, you know, details from anybody. The calls get rerouted through us to you guys. So, you know, the student will know your name, and that's it. That's as far as that goes.
Thank you.
I'll roll with it anyway. More of a reflection, really. This is absolutely amazing. Like, genuinely, really incredible. I work for a company that delivers the Care Leaver Covenant on behalf of the Department for Education. And as you'll know, like, massive proportion of care experience young people are in prison. We also work with about 700 employers that really are desperate to kind of give back across that intersectional piece. So care experience, criminal justice, homeless, like, they're not separate groups of people. They all intersect with each other. So, yeah, really, really keen to support this and do what we can.
Great, get in touch, please.
Yeah, get in touch. And we have a number of smaller projects, like we said, that we run both regionally, and some that we're putting in proof of concept now that are quite interesting. For example, we have a creative arts project that we've just started, which includes digital media, fashion design, and music production and performance. We've targeted a group of a cohort within prisons that don't like to go to education, don't want to study, don't see the point of it. So we've taken the functional skills that, you know, nationally need to be delivered, and we've infused them into this creative arts project. So we're getting guys actually studying whilst they're doing the things that they love. Precisely. It's a little bit sly, but it works.
Your work as well, it impacts on so many different outcomes. We know there's a crisis in the higher education sector, so it benefits HE sectors. We know there's a crisis in reoffending rates and homelessness. Like, it's just awesome.
For universities, this is opening up a whole new cohort of students, fee-paying students, who are, you know, really hungry for study, and there's a little bit of material adaptation needed. But actually, it just goes back to the teaching, and this is what we specialise in, is supporting the universities to look at how can you make those small adaptations, staying within the academic rigour of the qualification, and, you know, let's bring in some more students, because, as you say, that's what universities need at the moment.
Hello. Coming from a large organisation, it sounds really impressive what you've done, and potentially the partnerships that you're offering. Can you tell me what works well with organisations, and maybe what are the barriers or constraints that you face when you're working with large organisations?
The first thing is understanding the cohort. That's key. And it's something that we will do as well. We provide training for companies in how to work with people in prison and those on probation, because obviously people in prison are not staying there forever. they're on their way out. So understanding things like reasonable adjustments needs to be made to support a prisoner. Understanding what disclosure looks like, how real disclosure works, so that it's effective and not stigmatizing and labeling. Those kind of nuances are absolutely key to being able to support on a larger scale. If the human side is somewhat lacking, or guys just want to support in a financial way, then again, it's how we map projects with individual companies and organisations, so we can have that conversation.
And all of our work is student-led, so it's all about what our students telling us they need and want. So it's not about us imposing solutions. So if we're working with a big organisation, we would expect to be working collaboratively. We would expect to be talking either to students already released from prison who have the ideas, or even going into the prison. We're setting up learning communities, going in and talking to students, what do you need? What can we do to help? So it's not about us imposing those solutions. We obviously do both have that experience ourselves, as I said, all of our team. But if we're working with a big organisation, we would start by saying, well, what's the scope of this? And let's go and speak to some students about what's going to be really worthwhile.
Questions for you, Dan, really. We just done quite a bit of work with Belmarsh, and I think this is fantastic what you've done. And I'm from construction, so we have a lot of Section 106 requirements, social value requirements, ex-offenders, how can we get them in? We work with 9, and we've still got 2, which is great. The others have just completely fell off the path. How do you, from your experience, how do you feel we, as a company, could be doing more before they get to the stage? Is it? I know we talk about schools and engaging, but they're quite young. But is there anything else you feel we could be doing as a company to help? Because they're great workers, the physical, kinesthetic learners, practical, and we've got a shortage as well. So have you got any advice how we could?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first and foremost, there's a feature of your standard prisoner that sits across our prison estate, is the sense of loyalty. Yeah, there's a sense of loyalty that you can engage that. So you meet with a prisoner before he comes out, you build a relationship with him or her, and then they go through the process. Nobody wants freeness. Nobody wants to, they want to earn their position through interview like anyone else, etc., etc. But that enables them to that sense of earning a place, and then that sense of loyalty then kicks in where they would like to stay. But first and foremost, it needs to feel like home to them, so that it needs to feel like they're the same as everybody else. Yeah, if special measures doesn't work, understanding the differences and nuances and being able to, again, fuse that into the rest of your workforce, so that they understand how disclosure will work with their colleagues. You guys will understand who needs to be disclosed to, etc., etc. And so they have that safety. The second most crucial thing is support, mentoring. Having mentors that look like themselves, that understand their positions, that can help them, successfully. This is why our mentoring service is absolutely key. We have mentors up and down the country that support our students as they're coming through the door. They don't have a shelf life. It's not 6 months of mentoring. It's for as long as they need it. So they will tell you when they no longer need a mentor. That transitional period especially is the biggest point of drop-off. Most people will fail without support as they're coming through the door with the best intentions, with the most determination. They will still fail without some support. It's absolutely key. So if you have and we have a whole mentoring program, so we can talk to you about that and show you what that looks like, help with that. But the fact of the matter is someone to walk with you. In Norway, they have a 3-step. What's the word? They have a 3-step provision for people coming out of prison, and they say, what does somebody need? They need somewhere to go, something to do, and someone to love. That simple. Love being the support in that instance.
Thank you. The work that you're doing is absolutely remarkable. And it's more of a statement, really. Thank you for doing it. It resonates with me very much. But I really just urge everyone in the audience to really not look at this through altruistic eyes. These people come with grit, resilience, emotional intelligence, the ability to improvise in tough situations, and perseverance. These are all the top predictors of success. There's over decades of data to back this up. Retention is way better. You know, it's absolutely remarkable. But what's really important about this is that it changes the lives of those standing on the shoulders of them as well. And so this is really, really important stuff. So if you really want to change your life and break those cycles, those chains that you spoke of being the first in family to graduate, now your children are following suit. Similar things have happened to me. My son inspired and landed himself a job as a teacher's assistant because he said, I want to do what you do, Dad. I want to help people. So I just really urge people to do this, but do it and understand that what you will get is better productivity, higher productivity, and better retention. For justice impacted candidates, it's 70% better retention. So there's a really strong business case here to be had. And I really do applaud the work that you're doing, and 100% open to collaborating in any way possible to shift hearts and minds in the right direction of this change, because we need to.
That's almost a mic drop moment. So thank you, everybody.